this presentation I prepared keeping LIS students and the younger profession in mind. So maybe senior profession may find some of the content fundamental and maybe repeated. Just with that, I'd like to start my presentation. During this my presentation, I will be taking about how what is the institution repository, why, and what is the why issue IR needs to be developed, and what are the components, the issues, and the benefits the institute gets by developing IR. And basically, I'll be moving to the DSpace, how using DSpace one can develop a IR within their institution. So, and also while talking about DSpace, I talk about what are the kind of hardware or the software is required and what are the kind of standards it follows and what DSpace can do and what is the information model and what are the different kind of people associated with DSpace and what are the kind of protocols like why PMH and why WARI. These are the very important protocols for interoperability of the metadata and the digital objects, how they are very helpful. And CNRI handle system, a Corporation for National Research Institute handle system, how it helps to have a persistent URLs for digital objects. And working model, I just take you through the working model of IR using our IR repository. I will not be showing any live demonstration as such. I have made a screen of how from starting from how item can be submitted to IR. And what are the kind of harvested services and directories of repositories are also available. And then I summarize my presentation. So as you know that serial crisis in sometime in 1980s led to the open access movement, like starting with Budapest Open Access Institute, Berlin Declaration. So that made because of the support of that resulted in the support of the organizations, the government, funding agencies, individuals. So that because of the efforts of everyone, open access content steadily increased. Through the various, of course, open access models like Gold, Green, Libre, Gratis, and many more kind of types of open access models. And to some extent, this helped in bridging the digital divide of making available full text papers to all. Until then, as we experience as a senior people, earlier we used to find it very difficult to meet any of our user requirements unless we request a photocopy of the article from other libraries. But because of the open access movement, so many of the articles started appearing in repositories, different kind of repositories, are also on the website of authors. So that really helped. And Green Open Access enabled authors to host their research papers on institutional repository or a digital library or a website. So of course, in some cases, as per the copyright clearances or as per the publisher policy, whether what kind of version they are allowing to host it, depending on that. The institutions started hosting the papers on their repository, or there were public repositories where researchers started hosting their papers. So, what is an institution repository? So, it is basically a digital collection that preserve and provide access to the intellectual output of an institution. It is meant to be only for content of an institution. So why? It is because to encourage wider use of digital objects, to encourage the wider use of the research which is emanating from those organizations. And what kind of digital collections the IR usually include? Basically, the conference papers and the journal articles, thesis and dissertations, institutional publications. It could be reports, annual reports, or it could be working paper, it could be technical reports, the books, and e-learning materials. Basically, open education resources (OER). And data sets, nowadays research data management is taking up in a big way. So research data sets, whatever researchers have developed, that also can be hosted there. And images, audio, video material, any kind of material can be. And I would like to tell you that sometimes it may be restricted to particular type of collection. Like as Francis sir in the morning, during his session, he mentioned that IIS has two IRs. One is for the thesis and dissertation, other one is for the research publication of the researcher from Institute of Science. So that way it may be restricted to particular type of collections also. And why IR needs to be developed? Because there is a significant increase in overall research output coming from different institutions. And also it is because of the escalating cost of journals. You know that cost of journals is increasing every year, and libraries are finding it very difficult to sustain with the increasing cost of publication. And uncertainty over handling the and preservation and archiving of scholarly material. There is a kind of uncertainty how to preserve, because what happens, you take example of organization where a lot of old reports are lying, but nobody knows that when they'll be requiring for use. And if you digitize and put it in a kind of a archive repository within an institution, so anytime your institution want to look back to the history of the institute, then they'll be getting all of that content. So it helps in handling and preservation. Also, you take example of manuscripts. Handling of a manuscript is a very difficult kind of proposition in kind of archival sections of the university libraries. So in that case, if you digitize and put it, so it helps in preserving those materials, and so by that way, you protect those kind of materials. And it helps in increasing the institution's visibility, status, and public value, because many times we ask the institution, for example, government may ask, or your funding agency may ask, okay, what is that we are funding you so much? What is your ROI and what you are doing it, what kind of research you are coming with, is there any public? So if you put it on an institution policy, there is a possibility that your research, your institution research catching the eye of any reporter or a policy maker, so that way getting implemented. So it enables, then the other advantage is it enables open access to scholarly activity. That way, so the more and more people will be able to read the research what is emanating from the institution. And there is a kind of, I would like to make here how institutional repository or a digital library is different. Because many times, of course, we use these terms interchangeably. So institutional repository, as I mentioned, is meant to be organized around a particular institute, whereas digital library may not be. So it may be corresponding to the group of institutions, or it may be on a particular topic or a subject or a discipline. There are many examples. And the second thing is, often the IRs are dependent on a voluntary contribution of materials from the scholars within the institution, whereas digital libraries are the product of a deliberate collection development policy. They encourage collection development from different set of researchers. And the third this thing is, are mainly repositories that therefore only offer limited users, whereas digital library may offer different kind of service like reference and research assistance, interpretive content, those kind of special resources. For example, IR example is our institution repository at IG IDEA. This is an example of IR, whereas libraries digital library developed by DRDC is an example of digital library, because LDL encourages all library professionals from India to host, not only from India, anywhere in part of the world, they can host their full text of the papers, provided they have the copyright or the what kind of versions the publisher allowed. They can upload their papers so that the researcher from all over the world can get access to that paper, know that, and also the LDL may be harvested by some other source so that the content will get widely distributed worldwide. So this is an advantage. So that way the IRs and digital library, there is a kind of a difference, so that we need to understand. So what are the key components of IR within an organization? Basically, the faculty, research staff, and the students who are the generators of information. They are a very important component of an IR. Librarians and the system administrators, they are all the intermediaries who help in creating IR and running it. And the content, the research materials, whatever research material happening from the institution are published by your researcher, that is the important aspect. Then the infrastructure, which is the hardware and software, which is another important component, as Chris rightly mentioned. So whether you use internal or cloud computing, it makes a lot of difference. So that makes a very important component. And the funding. So without funding, as you know, you cannot do anything, because this developing an IR requires some amount of, even though software comes free, but still you need to invest on the hardware, you need to invest in software, and you need to use in the network. So to make it up and running. So what are the benefits an institution is going to get by developing the IR is increase the visibility of institutional research. You may have a cost savings, and it avoids duplication of research, because your research or somebody is doing the research will come to know what research the institution is undertaking. And it broadens the scholarly communication process, and there is a reduction in time in publishing the research. For example, there is a kind of preprint you are trying to bring in before you putting the publication to the journal, so you can host your preprint on your repository, so that your research is already known in the public. So you have published this paper because any repository, what you do, they also have a kind of a this thing, indexing type or kind of a thing with kind of Google or Google Scholar of a kind of search engine. So your material gets indexed in those kind of a search this thing, and you will get a more user audience. Your users, your research of your researchers get more user audience, and yeah, there will be a good digital preservation for posterity. I mean to say, I give example of Manuscript. If you preserve it so that for future use will become much more easier, and it helps to bridge the digital divide among the haves and have-nots, and it enables the open access to quality. That is very, very important, so that it enables everyone to make use of that research. But IRs are not without any problems or the issues, because many times I've seen that IR face the support of management is very, very poor in some of the organizations. Even whatever you do, they say that okay, whether it is required, other that kind of a thing. And important thing is securing faculty and researchers participation. Is very difficult, because sometimes they think, what is the use if I post my paper here? And there are different kind of objections also, like impediment to publication. If I put my paper, whether I'll be able to publish my paper, or if somebody is going to copy my paper. So in that case, publisher may not allow me to this thing. How the quality control is going to happen? What are the IPR issues? Author rights? What will happen to the author? These kind of questions. There is a kind of a this thing is attentions of the faculty. We need to that kind of thing in IR spaces, and encouraging repository participation, because that encouragement we need to, as this thing library, we need to, a lot of encouragement needs to be done, then only the content will, otherwise it becomes difficult. And repository management and policy issue, that's one more issue, where that how the management of a repository is going to happen, what are the kind of policies the repository is going to undertake, whether it's going to keep all the content open access, or is there any kind of restricted access. So these are the kind of policy issues also will be there. And the last one is technical and system issues. I think this may not be much of a concern with the kind of technology we are getting into, like cloud kind of hosting. So we may to resolve, but of course we support from management, and also of course the funding and all. It is not that it's going to be an issue over it. And what are the kind of different software one can use to develop IR? Is DSpace is the one software which is very popular. ePrint is the another one, and Fedora, Greenstone. Greenstone not many people use because it has its own limitation, but still a smaller kind of institution, still they can use it to develop an IR within the institute, or to provide access. But it has limitation, but still some organizations do use it. If you are comfortable with it, you can use it. So here I'm going to talk about DSpace, how DSpace can be used for developing an IR. So what is DSpace? All of you know that, because DSpace, the existence is more than, because I got my first training in 2005 under Yadi Prasad sir. So actually, in fact, it's not an exaggeration to tell that it is Dr. Yadi Prasad sir and his team. Basically, they popularized DSpace in India. Of course, the NCSI and this training program, and it is got much more popularity in India because of NCSNet and DRDC, their products all over India, and also because of the training program. Librarians like me got trained in use of this repository system, and we developed our distro sometime back in 2005. So it can be used to develop an IR. You can use it for learning object repository. You can use it for anything. You can even develop a digital library. Even you want to develop a data repository, also you can. But data repository, there are different kind of software available. People do use that, and it is a system developed by MIT Libraries and HP. And this is a digital object management system, and it helps for interoperability of metadata through YPMH. And it also facilitates preservation and interoperability of digital objects, and it allows open access and digital archiving, low cost, including the all hardware and software components, robust, scalable, modular, and user friendly. Here I would like to be robust and scalable in the sense that you can scale it up to any extent, like Dr. Francis mentioned that any hardware tomorrow you need a more RAM, or you need more storage space, you can just scale up in the cloud computing. Here, DSpace has that kind. For example, your hard disk is full. They have a kind of asset store kind of a thing. You can add one more hard disk, and you can the system will take it up for adding up the content. And also, it is user friendly in terms of managing the system. Maybe from system side, it has like the kind of maybe many of the professional library professionals may find it difficult to follow it up. Then definitely you need to take the help of a computer professional, or resource person like Dr. ARD processor or Francis or the people who are quite familiar with the technical side. And it is a multi-user environment and the platform independent. And what are the key features of the DSpace? It is full text searchable, and the discovery is a search browse within the entire DSpace, or by you can search in the collections, and can handle any type of file, and best known for text-based files. And the files in DSpace system are called bit streams. Whatever full text or the image or whatever you're uploading, they call it bit streams. And it's optimized for indexing Google and Google Scholar. So whenever you develop any content, they'll get also automatically indexed in Google Scholar. And it also has the persistent URL handle system. It's called CNRI handle system. So with that, you will have a kind of a DOI kind of a handle for each and every digital object of posting. And it comes with two user interfaces. One is Java Server Pages user interface, and other one is XML user interface. It is up to the developers to use whatever best software, best interface they would like to have it. And is highly customizable. You can customize as per your requirement. You can put your logo, you can bring in your own images, you can change the look and feel. Those things are quite possible, but maybe you may have to be quite familiar with the back end of the DSpace for that. And also it has the authentication for access restrictions. For example, if you have any publication restrictions, if you have a restriction from the publisher, or if you have a certain material that could be meant only to be used by your group of people. For example, in case of ETD at IISc, many of the theses are not available for everyone. Only if you have IISc ID, then only you will be able to access those theses. It depends on the institution policy. So accordingly, you can put an embargo or you can put access restrictions for outsiders. And it has a very good statistics features regarding how much collection you have, how much usage is happening, because we need to give a report on the repository how it is being used, because even nowadays accreditation agencies like NAAC and NARF also ask for this kind of content. And here it also provides the RSS feeds so that about the collections and what are the kind of items that have been built within this space. And coming to the hardware and software, I would like to mention it requires a computer server, or the internal server, or it could be on the cloud, or you can run it on a small any Pentium PC also. For the minimum kind of facility you can run it. Internet connectivity I just mentioned optional, because some of the institution would like to run it within the institution. In that case, internet may not be required. But I think now looking to the present era, the internet is a must, so you can go for it. And it is basically available for Linux, Windows, and Mac, but Linux is recommended, and is open source, built on Apache web server and Tomcat servlet engine. Uses PostgreSQL, the SQL for backend RDBMS, or even it can be run on Oracle RDBMS. And for personal, it uses CNRI handle system. And it follows the different standards and the file formats and the capabilities. The standard followed is Dublin Core metadata schema, that is a default schema. It uses, of course, it can also be used for other schemas like METS and MODS. And it uses OIPMH, basically OAI protocol network harvesting. And also the new protocol which is coming, OAI WARI, there is even object use and exchange also possible through the DSpace. It is Unicode compliant, so that any kind of language, any language material can be uploaded here, can be made available in different languages, even interface can be changed. So you can use in different languages. And these are the different file formats it supports: text, images, audio, video. And exports any of data you'd like to export, it can be exported in XML format. And it supports crosswalks through the OIPMS DC, the Dublin Core, qualified DC, and METS, MODS, and crosswalk walks through the OI for harvesting digital objects. And it can be extended to any metadata schema, as I mentioned to you. And even the cloud hosting is possible now, because many of the service providers like Informatics in India or DuraSpace at the international level, they are hosting, they are providing the hosting services. Even you as you can take the hosting service in order to run the software. You can just manage the repository from your end. So what are the kind of different metadata available in DSpace? One is descriptive, which is a qualified Dublin Core to explain about each of the items. And there are administrative metadata, It explains about who can access, remove, or modify an item, and stored in database schema. And some data is also stored or it is Dublin core metadata schema. There are also structural kind of metadata, very basic. What bit streams are contained in an item, what collection committees does an item belong to. This kind of metadata it follows. And here I have given an example of a DC metadata for an item. For example, in our digital repository, in our IR, so for a particular item, how kind of the data, metadata is getting stored. You can see that DC contributor, author, DC accession date, or data available, date available, and date issued. So this is kind of information it stores in a kind of a DC metadata item. It uses the qualified core Dublin core elements, and also you can add your own element also. So those are kind of, that's why it is called a qualified Dublin. And what the DSpace can do for you, it captures any digital research material, either directly from creators, or you can digitize, you can host it from the library. And there is a large scale, stable, managed and long-term storage. You can do that. It describes descriptive, technical, rights metadata, and it also provides persistent identifiers. And it can be distributed via World Wide Web with necessary access control. As I mentioned, to give an example of IICTD database repository, and it preserves the content in supported formats for long-term preservation. So long-term preservation also it takes care of. And what is the information model in DSpace? What you have already might have seen that each digital library or IR which is developed in DSpace has a communities, basically communities in the sense that it could be research units of the departments, and there are collections within the communities. There may be distinct groupings like articles, recent dissertation, conference postings, and then there are items within the collections, logical content objects, receive persistent identifier. Then there are bit streams within the item. This is the information model. Just to put it into a graphical kind of a this thing, there is a community. Within community, you may have a sub community. And within sub-community, then the collection comes, item comes. Or from the community, you can directly, you may have a collection. And for example, here I have given a Raman Research Institute as an example. Here, for example, they have a different community like C.V. Raman and his work and the science at the Raman Institute. I have taken one community as an example. Under that community, there are various collections like C.V. Raman scientific papers, C.V. Raman scientific papers 2, volume number so and so. I have taken C.V. Raman, volume number 1. Under that, there are so many items. They are basically items within that. So this is how the information model looks in the DSpace. And another example of an information model, for example, you take a bigger university. You have schools, you have departments, you have labs, you have centers, and the programs are. So all of the workflow process gets stored in the DSpace system, and the users get access either from the department or they may access from the center, and they may access from any of the collections or the items. So this is how the DSpace provides the system. And coming to the workflow in DSpace, for example, how after a submission of an article or how after submission of a particular paper, how the workflow works basically. Once a submission happens, you may be authorized submitter, so it could be your faculty, it could be your researcher, or it could be your librarian or a library staff. They submit a paper and it goes through a workflow process first, wherein that somebody checks it, who could be a librarian or could be a subject expert, and if they think that this is not a right one, if they reject it, then again it will go back to submitter. If it is accepted, then it go to workflow option 2. So wherein that basically it could be a editor, it could be a person who may be a librarian, he or a library staff who edit the metadata. For example, because when a faculty submit, the whatever metadata they enter may not be correct. So in order to check that, then there is a edit metadata step. If anything, any problems here, again it may get rejected, go back to submitter. If it is everything is right, it may get accepted, then goes to workflow 3, where basically it's the administrator or the database repository manager who again checks the metadata and he ultimately approves it. Once he commits to the archive, here in this case they use called commit to archive. So once he commits it to archive, then only the submitted item will be visible in the repository. So it is the how the DSpace workflow usually is how it works. So within DSpace, you can search and browse, as I already mentioned, by title, author, date, and subject. These are the options within the community or within the collection, or you can search the entire DSpace, or the community also can be searched. And who are the people who are associated with DSpace? Basically, they are called as E people in DSpace environment. There are anonymous users, like that. For example, I'm accessing IISc ETD database. I don't have any kind of a login ID for that. I, as a user, I can just access it and see what kind of pieces are available. Then there are members who wish to subscribe to the collection. For example, I am interested and I am allowed to subscribe. Then what I'll do, I'll go to the particular collection. Then I subscribe to that. So what it does, it helps me to know that as and when an new item gets added to that collection, I get an email saying that there's a new thesis or a new research paper has been added to that collection. Then there are submitters, basically authors or the library staff who have been authorized to submit. So they are the one who submit items to this space. And there are reviewers. Reviewers maybe they are authorized to review the submissions. Maybe basically they are subject experts. They review whether what is being submitted to repository is the correct kind of a material, whether it is the right material which can be added as per the policy of the repository. So then they take care of. Once then the next level comes the metadata editors. Basically, they are library professionals who validate the metadata. Because as per the metadata, for example, we enter surname first, then the first name later, like how as per BitLogic principles. So it can be checked accordingly, and then finally it goes to the administrator or repository manager who approves or who commits to the submission. So then coming to the OIPMH protocol, its importance. Basically, a OIPMH protocol for meta harvesting, what it does, it helps you to support the data interoperability among the distributors. For example, there are different kind of harvesting search services available nowadays. For example, there are n number of distro IRs are available all over the world. If you look at the open door or door kind of directories, you find there are so many repositories all over in terms of thousands are available. Wherein if anybody would like to search all of it, then it is not possible. You go into every repository, it becomes very difficult for any individual to search for the digital material. So through OIPMH, one can basically harvest those metadata. And OIPMH, in order to enable that, uses different kind of verbs. Using that, one can know about the kind of records using the verbs. Basically, from the backend, basically it happens using a base URL of the DSpace. So one can harvest, provided it has been allowed to do that. Otherwise, sometimes some kind of restrictions it is imposed that may not happen. But otherwise, usually most of the IR or open kind of repositories wherein that. So one can harvest the metadata of from one repository to another repository and provide a kind of a search service. And other, which is a very good this thing, the latest version of DSpace has this OAI ORE protocol, and it's important. Basically, it enables not only, see, earlier we were harvesting only metadata, but now it is also possible to harvest the objects also. Along with the metadata, you can even the harvest object reuse and action. You can harvest the objects, digital objects, and provide a search. For example, Digital Library of India. Not only if you allow that, it not only harvests the metadata, it also harvests the digital objects and stores it on Digital Library of India platform. So that you need not have to, otherwise in case only metadata we harvest, then we are linking back to original repository to access the text of the document. But here in case even the digital object are identified, and the new service provider can be able to provide those content from their service. And then coming to the CNI handle system, and here basically individuals or organizations who are developing a repository need to request for this handle from CNRI, and it is available for an annual fee for 1 or 5 years. And it works like a DOI, document object identity for article, which is a permanent irrespective of change in the internet domain name of article. For example, today we use iga.ac.in. Tomorrow we decide to change the domain to iga.edu. If you are linked up any of our full text papers, iga.ac.in/ whatever our repository address, then the item address, if you entered it, after some time if somebody is referring to that article, then they'll not be able to get access to that paper. So if you have a handle system, and handle will come like that, for example, for IGIDR, annual fee charged for handle services is $50 per year. And for example, a handle, how it comes, it is a numeric number. For example, for IGIDR, we have a number 2275. That is the handle number, handle prefix has been assigned to us by CNRI. So, for example, how the handle looks like www.handle.net slash prefix 2275 slash whatever your item number. So, like that, it will be helpful for anyone to access the resources permanently, like a persistent URL address kind of. And here I would like to show, this is our IR. It is a very fundamental. It is not having much of the collection. It is just includes our publications and abstracts of our thesis and dissertation. Now we are we will soon migrating to new server, having full text of the thesis and all. That is the decision we are taking, and we will also be going to post most of the even research papers of our this thing. So we have come to this thing. So that will be have much more kind of a robust, and we'll be upgrading. Right now we are using 5.5x this thing's software version, and now we have 6.3, which is people are using it. So we'll be soon upgrading, and then we'll be having much more content in this. And I would like to show for the youngsters how the working model of IGID, working model of a DSpace repository works. So just to show that, I means that it is just to showcase, because it's not possible for me to give a live demonstration. So I've just made a screenshot of it just to, I'll run through it so that I hope you'll be able to just understand. Okay, and whenever you want to submit this thing, one has to log into a repository, and we call it Kautilya at IGID because Kautilya is the one who is the first economist from India during Emperor Ashoka's time. So we have named after him. And here you have to sign in by using the email address and the password. Once you log in, and then the repository comes, and here the login information comes in. And here, if you want to create a community, I just run through starting from the creating community. So then, when you click on a creating community, then metadata sheet appears, wherein you have to give a name of your community and a short description if you have any introductory text, and copyright text. If anything is a new something, either you can put all that information you want to, but otherwise you can just put HTML. That's what how I learned from the editors saying that if you don't give that, it's some kind of junk character used to come earlier version of, I don't know now in the latest version those things haven't been. Once you develop a kind of a community, so basically community gets created, then you have option to create a collection within the community. For example, in IGID publication community, we have a project, the proceedings and project we put as a collection. Now we are going to create a new collection. For example, now I am creating a collection working papers within my IGID publication community. So here I am creating a collection by giving a name and a short description, all those kind of a thing, and then even you can upload an image of, not only for collection, even for an image. Once you hit a create button, your collection gets created, and then here submit a new item to this collection. That will appear in the news item. Once you click that, then a worksheet will appear to enter the data. See, here it is a default kind of a worksheet which can be edited as per your requirement. There is a possibility which is editable. You can make a separate metadata submissions sheet for different kind of documents, like thesis, you can make it separate, and for your faculty publication, make it separate. For your institute publication, make it separate. Different worksheet can be created. This is the default one which we are using it. So it like that, you can enter it, all the details, whatever is there. So then if you go to the next one, again you can put the abstract of the paper and the keywords. We have added the keywords, and then once I click next, what it does, it asks me to upload a full text of the file. So here I choose a file, I uploaded the file. Once you hit a button next, then what happens? It asks you to review the submission. Is there any error there? So it enables the submitter to look into the data, whether the data what he or she has entered is correct or not. If any corrections are required, and one can make any corrections over here only. So then once that is done, then you will take the next step, the license step. Basically, it comes with the describe, upload, review, license, and complete. That's what the DSpace follows, a 6-step approach whenever you submit any item. So then the license is there. This license is a default license which can be modified as per your institution requirement. So it's possible to modify it. And once the submission happens, so item gets submitted, submission complete. So this is the submitted level. Whomsoever is authorized to submit, they can do the work up to here. If submitter himself or herself is an administrator, then they can take a workflow process. So now, since I myself have submitted using administrator ID, then I'll go to the how the workflow process for the administrator it works. For example, in my workflow process, again, what will happen? The submitter, whatever is submitted, there are so many submissions are there. Now the latest submission which has appeared over here, the red mark one, I'm not sure whether it's visible there. So once I click here, then it will take me to the task workflow process. Once I select this, then it will take to the item submission process. Here, I don't know whether there are different steps. Directly, I can commit to archive. I can go to edit metadata. I can return to the task code. These are the three options available. Since I only made a data, enter the data, I know that all the fields, whatever I entered, corrected. So now I'm going to approve it. Here is basically approval process. I just click on the commit to archive. Then what will happen? That item after some time it gets visible on your main repository, so that your users who are using your repository will get to see that new item which is being added to the repository. Also, if any of the users, if they have subscribed to the email of the collection, then an email goes to them saying that the new paper has been added to this collection. So this way, and once you click that, you get a full display of that paper, all those things. So, and then also it shows the view or open option. So here this is a handle, see handle SDL handle.net 2275407. That is the item number. So once you click here, then full text of the paper. So this is the complete process of DSpace, how it works actually. And next, coming to the harvesting, as I mentioned, OIPMH importance. So using OIPMH protocol, one from IR, content from our metadata from IR can be harvested, which can be searched from a single search interface. So it is done using services such as PKP Open Harvester System. So using this is the open source, which can even you can download in your institution, and you can try to create a search service in your area. For example, tomorrow I decide to create a kind of a search service for the IRs in economics. So I can go to different repositories, and if they are open, and then I can use their base URL, and I can install the PKP Harvester in our institute server or on cloud computing. Then I can develop a system for economic search service. Like similarly, you can also develop, or you can make use of some. Here I'm going to give some examples of such services. One is Digital Commons Network. It is a very good harvesting search service, harvested search services. And what it has done, it has indexed repository content from many of the repositories from all over the world. It's a free service. It is available to anyone. Anyone can go there, and even library science in our field, there are many papers available. If you go there and search, you'll get those papers. And other one is very old is Oyster, which was earlier independent service, but now it is part of WorldCat because it's been taken over by OCLC. So this is a part of OCLC now. So, but there is a separate search available for it. Here also one can search for the full text of the digital objects which have been available from different IR, basically institute repositories. And in order to know as that how many repositories available in your area, or how many repositories are there from India, so there are two directories. One is ROR, which is maintained at I think Stanford University by ePrints people. So this is the ROR eprints.org, and other one is maintained by JISC. Basically, this is the Sherpa. All of you know about it. In UK, and here also you can enter by repository name, or you want to know how many repositories are available all over the world. This is a kind of an index to know different kind of repositories available, because many times we will not be knowing what repository is available. So they can also, those can be find out from here, directory of repository. And just to summarize, institute repository provide a window of opportunity to preserve and showcase institutions. So this is very important, and they are very good in terms of providing a kind of opportunity to bring visibility for an institution, then it helps in increasing the citations for the authors, So this is really bring a lot of opportunity for the users. Then integration of IRs along with discovery services. There are many libraries that are subscribing to discoveries like EBSCO Discovery Service or Informatics JGate kind of a services. So if you integrate your IR with Discovery Service, then there is a possibility of effective use of resources, what is being posted on IR. Otherwise, what is happening, IR are a kind of a standing kind of a integrated, is kind of a disintegrated kind of a service where they are available, but only very few people are doing it. I, as a librarian, know that there is IR, but how many people go to that accessing the content? So that has become an issue. So, and the next thing is NAC and NRF provide certain points to institutions for having a discussion. I think you, any of the institutions where we undergo NAC courses or NRF, there you know that there is some points for the library if there is an IR exists within the institution. And so that libraries can make efforts in developing IRs and educating their users in the importance of providing open access to research. So this is a rest on us to make develop an IR and educate our users. What is the importance? Why you need to post there, and how your research gets exposed, and how people will be able to know about your papers, about you basically. Because now visibility has become very important. Now, for example, if any information if it is not available on the internet, then our users say that information never exists. Similarly, for the researchers, if they are not visible on the internet, then they will never exist. This kind of a scenario we live in. So that we as a information service providers, we need to make these kind of services up and also educate our users in order to enable providing open access to this. And some youngsters would like to learn more about this space, they can go to thisspace.org. And also there is a LibLive site which is developed by Dr. Yadi Prasad and Dr. Barve. So they have, of course, it comes with combined kind of applications along with Koha, and many things that one CD you can install everything. And there is a demo DSpace website available, wherein that you can go yourself and check up how the DSpace functions. And also there are a lot of good tutorials available nowadays. See, when we were working with DSpace, they were not, but now I really appreciate the efforts of different professionals like this one, Dr. Tripathi, who has a channel called Librarian Guide. He has shown the complete DSpace functioning, how actually the DSpace works, what are things you need to keep in mind. So even the teachers also can make use of these things, and also kind of a flipped class, kind of class environment also they can encourage students to go through these videos, and then teachers can impart, they can check the doubts of the student, then they can take them to the DSpace kind of this actual functioning, so that then it becomes very easy for the students to follow those kind of things. So this is, I just want to request to all the teachers to, so that this kind of, because now we are going to live in the online kind of environment, so that these kind of things will also reduce the stress on the teachers, because teachers have to do so many things now, not only teaching, they have to do a lot of administrative work, because I also work in a university for some short time. I know that how much administration expects a teacher to do for administration. So it becomes at a time difficult for teachers to teach everything within the course work time. So at the time, if we use this kind of a mixed kind of a learning environment, then it will also become very useful. With that, I would like to end my presentation, and I would like to thank once again LIS Academy, Professor Ponnu sir is my teacher, and Dr. Shivram and NCSN Foundation. So we would like to thank it, and they are doing really good work. I think we should support the LIS Academy in fulfilling their endeavors. They are trying to do something good, so that they can take up kind of a thing, good name to the profession, so we can contribute. With that, I would like to end my thinking, and I am open for any questions. Thank you.
Dr. Pujar, thank you very much for your detailed presentation on DSpace, which is one of the popular archiving software which is widely used across globe. And I'm sure our webinar participants have got a very insightful information about DSpace. Now I request our moderator, Dr. Satyaranjan Sahu, to moderate any questions to Pujar.
Thank you, Shivram. Thank you, Dr. Pujar, for your nice talk on DSpace. Lot of questions were there on DSpace, and many I just answered since I have experience in DSpace. only I am taking 2 questions, and which I found that it is better you should give the answer. One is from Dr. Prakash Balwar. Question is that in this pandemic COVID-19 situation, how IR are beneficial for people, especially in rural areas?
Dr. Pujar, you can stop sharing your screen. So
Yeah,
that
sure. Yeah. See, in the kind of this pandemic, see, IR in rural area, the first thing is basically they need to have access to the internet. Yes, assume that they have access to the internet, then definitely it helps in getting some access to some of the research material. For example, I give example, a researcher is working on a COVID, for example. Just take example of COVID only. So working, so there is lot of research being undertaken by CSR labs in India. They're trying to make such research, and also different kind of medical institutions like ICM are also doing it. So there's, and also different international repositories, also a lot of content is being hosted on IR. So if they get access to those material, then definitely they'll be having the world knowledge at their doorstep, wherever they are located, maybe a rural area, or it could be city, or it could be a remotest part of the country. So this enable them to enhance their understanding about the COVID research, and they get the understanding about in fulfilling their research also. For example, if they would like to update their community about what are the implications of the COVID for a rural community, how it gets expanded, how this disease gets epidemic expands to the rural area. They'll be able to guide it. That way, I think it helps in furthering their research. That's what I can say.
Second question is by some Sanmati Jain. The question is how to integrate ORCID into DSpace for authority control.
Yeah, it's a good question. In fact, now DSpace has the integration, ORCID integration facilities available. I think that it is possible, but it's very difficult to explain here how it can be done. So actually, in fact, I have not done it because we are in the process of upgrading it. Once the upgrade is, we will be doing it. But there is a documentation available, and it can be used. I think Dr. Tripathi in his video, I think he has explained about it. Or I think when Dr. Francis would like to say anything about ORCID, then I ask Dr. Francis for comment.
If you allow, I can also answer this question.
Yeah, yes, please.
Actually, authority, we can create an authority file with ID and the name of the author. There the ID will be ORCID ID and the name will be author's name. So ORCID ID in a JavaScript, there is, if we are just modifying little bit in that program, so that one can search by the ORCID ID, and it will pick up the names to data entry time. And same we can put in database also to search by the ORCID ID or getting it. Both way it can be possible, but it is a little bit knowledge of programming and other things is required. And last question I want to take, that how to metadata entry special character like mathematical chemical symbols in DSpace by Balabhadra Srinivasan, B. Srinivasan, that how will enter mathematical and chemical symbols in DSpace metadata entry.
Yeah, I think because in fact during my, because when you would like to enter it, basically I had seen a kind of a presentation where that you can just copy and paste it. DSpace usually takes care of it. In case you will, then I am not sure how it's big, but basically I've seen that you can cut and paste it simply. DSpace expects it takes into its repository. I think it is possible by that. That's what I think. Sao, if you have any other, you can.
Actually, in data entry stage, to means, for example, CO2 to mention as a subscript, it is there in data input form. It is not possible. Only if we are using as Unicode character, that time only it is possible, but directly it is not possible. It creates problem. I have tried many times.
Because I have not.
Yeah, ePrints allows, I think Dr. Francis Joykant has done it, and Francis sir knows how to enter this mathematical and chemical symbols to enter in ePrints.
I think Dr. Francis, you would like to add something, please.
Right. In ePrints, there is something called as libraries, LaTeX related libraries are there.
Okay.
So libraries have to be installed on the ePrint server. Then it allows us to enter LaTeX symbols, the mathematical equation as LaTeX symbols. Okay. Then it gets reflected in the user interface. But the problem is, suppose if there are equations in the title, then you won't be able to do a search on the title of an article which has got mathematical symbols. So you need to have an additional field for the title, one with the LaTeX encoding, the other with plain as a text content. So that searching is done on the plain text field, and the display can be done on the field which is enabled for LaTeX encoding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pujar. Now I am handing over to Sivaram.
Thank you, Saho. Before I formally propose vote of thanks to speaker and moderator.